Do you work for Donald Trump? Yes or no?
If I'm permitted to say, we're an independent central bank. We're honored to be independent. Our independence came from you.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you. What steps would you take if the president or others in the administration target you or your fellow governors because he doesn't like how many of them are voting on interest rate policy?
So it's not my intuition to engage in hypotheticals, but I'll tell you this: the Supreme Court said
that's an easy way out.
The Supreme Court said that the Federal Reserve and the conduct of monetary policy is independent. To the extent there were questions about it, the courts answered those questions.
So what would you do?
I would continue to do my job.
Okay, good. Chair Walsh, do you agree that current monetary policy exists in an extremely polarized and politicized environment?
Outside the four walls of the Federal Reserve, there's no doubt a lot of politics. But my goal inside the central bank is for there to be no politics. To the extent there's politics there, we're going to get rid of them.
Well, I, along with many on my side, will say that the attempted firings of a sitting Fed governor and Fed chair in the central bank's 111-year history is quite the politicization and polarization of the Fed. Chair Walsh, at your nomination hearing a few months ago, you said, and I state, I am committed to ensuring that the conduct of monetary policy remains strictly independent. You just said that. Are you still committed to conducting independent monetary policy today?
Absolutely.
Given the current mistrust of government and the political environment surrounding your appointment, the decision to limit communications and offload Fed objectives to clandestine task forces with no clear transparency calls your motivations into question. Can you commit today to institute an explanatory framework that details the reasoning of the Fed's actions following policy changes?
Yeah, I'm here today, Congressman, to do just that. And I think I've demonstrated in my first 6 or 7 weeks in office a commitment to independence and a commitment to reform. Those two are of common importance, and I'm going to deliver on both of them.
I'm glad to hear that.
Mr. Chairman, first I want to commend you for looking to improve the data on which you base your monetary policy decisions. Up until now, we've relied on survey data as a substantial part of that, and increasingly Americans just don't voluntarily answer survey questions. I want to commend you for declaring your independence. We saw what happens in Argentina, Venezuela, and most notably Turkey when federal central bank independence is eroded. I would say ironically that had your predecessor caved to Trump and lowered interest rates below what economics would call for, we would have much higher inflation today, and that would have been bad for Americans. It would have been absolutely terrible for the Republican Party. So the your agency has saved Donald Trump from himself. And finally, I would say don't rely on this distinction between the Cook and the Slaughter cases. The idea that every congressionally created independent agency isn't independent except yours, you don't want to be relying on that. The distinctions the court makes between your agency and every other agency are rather weak historically. Our capital markets support our business expansion and our economy. Money market funds are an important part of that, buying short-term commercial paper from corporations. Our payment system is designed to meet the needs of honest Americans. That's why we have an anti-money laundering, know your customer rule that makes it a bad system for drug dealers, sanctions evaders, et cetera. There's a rival to these institutions, and that is a cryptocurrency, which literally means hidden money. and is designed to, and then we have in particularly stable coins, which are just like a money market fund, except you earn zero interest, and everything is hidden. Now, the Federal Reserve established liquidity facilities to support money market funds in the last crisis. Will the Federal Reserve support cryptocurrency or stable coins if they face a run-on from investors?
So, Congressman, thank you for mentioning many of those issues. We talked about a lot of them in your office, so I appreciate it. I still have the scars from the 2008 financial crisis.
We all
still
do.
have the scars from the extraordinary efforts that my colleagues and I, under Chairman Bernanke's leadership, had to do. That is not something we want to repeat.
Can you
The
assure
reforms
us
that we need are
that
to
you
try to
will
mitigate
not
that.
be bailing out stablecoin and cryptocurrency?
So I don't want to, I can be more broadly than that. We do not want to be in the bailout business, full stop.
But your predecessor did provide a liquidity function for money market funds. If, God forbid, we faced a similar circumstance in the crypto world, would you bail them out?
So I want to be very clear. We're going to do everything we can to mitigate those sorts of extraordinary risks. If and when they were to come in the next 4 years, we want to be in a position we're not bailing out anybody, including crypto.
You're not really answering the question. Obviously, everybody prefers our economy works well. And I'm certainly concerned with giving non-banks direct access to the payment system, and this Kraken filing with the Kansas City Fed is concerning, but I want to move on to Basel III. Your predecessor said that the capital requirements for banks in 2019 were about right. The current reproposal substantially raises those capital requirements. Were capital requirements about right in 2019, or should they be higher than that today?
So the good news is we have a proposed capital rule that's out for comment. I'm quite interested in getting the reports and the comments on that, and I look forward to reviewing those and making a judgment. I would say, as a first principle, strong capital ratios, strong liquidity ratios, strong supervision, and strong market discipline, they're all of a piece to ensure we don't find ourselves in a world where there's unsafe or unsound institutions.
Welcome you to the committee, Mr. Chairman, but I would also say to you that I will pray for you. And I'll pray for you because many of the questions that have been predicated today hinge upon a belief that you will sanction the president's desires. It is thought among the general public that you're in the position you're in because the president could not have the influence that he wanted to have with the prior chair, and he believes he can have it with you. So I hope that you will stand firm and honor your commitments that you're making, though some of them are not firm commitments as I understood your language. You indicated that you're interested in war. I appreciate this. But I believe you should also be interested in speculative bubbles. My assumption is that you are. Are you interested in bubbles, speculative bubbles, Mr. Chairman?
We've got a wide lens. We spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening.
I'm going to take that as a yes. Now, given that you're interested in speculative bubbles, let's just talk about a bubble that occurred. President Trump's meme coin, $Trump, profited an average of $1.74 million per day over his first year. $1.74 million per day. This amounted to approximately $636 million in total royalties and licensing fees generated at its launch. While this was happening, during that same period of time, nearly 1 million investors lost a combined $3.8 billion. This is because that meme coin lost value, dropped precipitously in value. It was a bubble, by the way. It is nothing. Anybody who's listening to me, if you've invested in a meme coin, you've invested in nothing. Zero. In a righteous world, it would be illegal. But given the Secretary of the Treasury that we have currently, it is not. And that's very unfortunate. SEC, the Secretary of the SEC, it is not. I think that we should concern ourselves with these speculative bubbles. And whether you like it or not, you have to concern yourself with it, because when you lower interest rates, you lower the rates such that there's more capital available for people to use for speculative reasons. So you have to be concerned about it whether you want to or not, because you don't want to see a speculative bubble. Can I have your assurance that you will be concerned about these speculative bubbles, Mr. Chairman?
So, Congressman, we want a resilient, strong, safe financial system, and we are looking at financial markets and we're looking at the real economy to make sure we deliver on what we can. Some of these other subjects are really more in your purview and responsibility than
they're in my purview. Excuse me for interrupting, but I have to. They're in my purview, but only because I choose to have them in my purview, and I make an issue of them. I have to vote on them. But they're in your purview too, because you decide whether the rates go up or down. And if you lower them, then people can engage in these speculative bubbles, such as the Trump meme coin, and they can lose a lot of money, losing billions of dollars while the president makes millions on a daily basis. This is the epitome of ridiculosity. At some point, we all have to take a stand, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be your opportunity. You're going to have to take a stand at some point, because this president is interested in making money. He puts money ahead of the people of this country. The people of the United States of America are secondary when it comes to the president. They may even be tertiary or quaternary, but they're not first. And at some point, you're going to have to make a tough decision as it relates to this president. Look, I'm not going to prejudge you. I'm going to assume that given your statements and the latitude that the Supreme Court has given you, that you'll make the right decision. But you're going to have to be concerned about a speculative bubble, especially as it relates to crypto. This is something that we'll all have to address. I thank you very much.
What's very clear is that U.S. inflation picks up immediately after Liberation Day on account of the tariffs. Global inflation picks up after the Iran war. You can see the spike. So, we had inflation generally coming down after 2020, starts picking up on account of tariff policy, and then starts picking up again on account of foreign policy in the United States. And you can just see in those charts what was domestic and what was international. How effective is monetary policy when it's fighting with fiscal policy or foreign policy or economic policy? Because I don't really understand the theory of the case that interest rates undo tariffs, or that interest rates undo high oil prices, or for that matter, QE or the other things. So, how concerned should we be about monetary policy that's got a different set of goals than the outcomes of fiscal policy right now?
So generally, Congressman, I'd say a couple things. First, we are takers of the fiscal policy decisions that you and your colleagues make. We will take that into account. I'm not suggesting that we act in isolation. What I am
to be clear, we didn't vote on tariffs or the Iran war.
But the policies that are made of the executive branch and of Congress, we're aware of them. We have a wide lens, but we then take those on board and make whatever decisions we best can consistent with our remit.
Do you have the tools to counter them?
We have tools that are powerful. Whether they're working at cross purposes or consistent with them is never easy to know in real time. But let me make one other important distinction. Military conflicts overseas, changes in trade policy, changes in immigration policy, those have an effect and we can take them into account. Often they have an effect on prices in the short term.
Time has expired.
Our business is whether those prices in the short term end up spreading out, and that's our responsibility.
During your Senate confirmation hearing on April 21st, 2026, you said, quote, "The measures I prefer looking at are things that are called trim averages, where we take out all of the tail risk." Separately, on May 31st, 2026, the Wall Street Journal reported that you want the Federal Reserve to give greater weight to the Dallas Fed's trim mean PCE. And so I want to offer a critique and then have you respond. Trim mean PCE lagged behind core PCE in detecting the inflation shock that began in 2021. Core PCE crossed the Federal Reserve's 2% target in March 2021. Trim mean PCE did not cross that same threshold into July, a 4-month lag. By February 2022, core PCE had risen to 5.4%, while trim mean PCE stood at only 3.6%, a divergence of nearly 2 percentage points. And so here's my question. If trim mean PCE detected the inflation shock later, understated its severity, and diverged from core PCE by nearly 2 percentage points, why should the Fed place greater weight on it when setting monetary policy? And to put a finer point on it, your core criticism of the Fed is that it was behind the curve on inflation. That same criticism can be leveled against your preferred measure on inflation. So why the disconnect?
So none of those are very good measures of underlying inflation. That Wall Street Journal story that you referenced is incorrect, that I have a preferred measure from one of the reserve banks. If I had a preferred measure, I wouldn't have called for a task force to go back to first principles, and the data task force will be looking importantly at inflation measures. My view is that we need new measures to understand the underlying changes in inflation. Am I interested in what's the mean or median price of a good in a big box retailer? You bet I am. And none of these measures capture that. I am super interested in finding new measures to do a better job to help us inform our decisions so that the inflation of the last 5 years don't continue.
Now, you have repeatedly described inflation as a choice. A simple yes or no question. Do you mean a choice by the Federal Reserve?
I mean a choice by the Federal Reserve and fiscal policymakers both, but I'm not trying to push the responsibility onto you. The Congress said that we're in the business of ensuring stable prices, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
So combating inflation is part of the Fed's statutory mandate, and you view inflation as a choice by the Fed. Combating unemployment is also part of the Fed's mandate. Do you view unemployment as a choice by the Fed?
We have no legislative orphans. We can't just take one part of the statute you give us and disown the others. I will just add a touch of complexity. We have more control over the price level ourselves than we do the unemployment rate. We have some say there, but so do all the policies that you and your colleagues put into place.
But obviously, if you aggressively raise interest rates, that could have the effect of causing unemployment. So in that sense, it's a choice, right? There are multiple forces that shape both inflation and unemployment, and the Fed is one among many. Quantitative easing. Do you believe quantitative easing is inherently inflationary? Yes or no, and then?
That question I can answer simply. I don't think it's inherently inflationary, especially if we adopt quantitative easing in the depths of a crisis. It can often provide liquidity to markets that need it.
So from 2008 to 2014, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet grew by a factor of 5, from about $900 billion to about $4.5 trillion. Yet over the same period, average headline PCE inflation was 1.7%, and average core PCE inflation was 1.5% below the Fed's 2% target. So the notion that quantitative easing may be inflationary fails to explain the non-inflationary effects of a multi-trillion-dollar five-fold expansion of the Fed's balance sheet from 2008 to 2014. Can you explain that for me?
Yes, Congressman, I can. If the balance sheet expansion were our only policy tool, then that is a reasonable conclusion to draw. But we have several policy tools. The dominant one is interest rates. And so we need to think about both of them in the context of monetary policy.
I want to quickly interject. Do you believe changes in the size of the Fed's balance sheet have an effect on inflation comparable to changes in interest rates?
You had me except for comparable. They can substitute for each other. They can complement each other.
But you don't see them as comparable?
But the balance sheet, they have different effects. The balance sheet tends to work more through asset prices first.
And I want to interject.
Interest rates more through the real economy.
Do you acknowledge that IORB weakens the relationship between the size of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet and inflation?
Not precisely. I don't know if I can answer that fully in one
You
sentence.
need to answer it in writing, and it'll be very interesting because these were good questions.
I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
With the time we have remaining that the chairman's allocated us, the chair now recognizes the chairman of our subcommittee on housing and insurance, Mr. Flood, and I recognize you for 4 minutes.